Hello, welcome to I Read This Book with Chris. With me, Chris. Today, I'm going to see if for the month of July I can keep up with Rocket Summer. Apparently, Michael Vaughn has Rocket into Summer. Rocket Summer, which I always want to say Rocket into Summer, which is not that. Basically, for the month of July, you read up until the 1930s for the first week. The second week, you read the 40s, then the 50s, then the 60s, to try to read some older sci-fi. And so while I'm telling you about this book, I will be drinking a cherry lime whiskey soda. So the book that I read for the first week of Rocket Summer is The Purchase of the North Pole by Jules Verne. This is a book which I do not regret reading, but I would not read again, and I do not suggest you do. If you enjoy science fiction for hard science fiction, that is books that are into the concept more than the story, this might be for you. If you're someone who enjoys character and growth and plot, all the human elements, I would probably stay away. The two things I can compare this book to most, at least for the type of science fiction it is, would be Strange Encounters of the Third Type. Let's see. I don't know if I said that right. And The Martian, the book. I have not read The Martian, the book. I have seen the movie, and I've also seen the movie of the Third Encounters. Basically, the characters don't matter. It's all about, for Third Encounters, Strange Encounters, it's what would happen if. And for The Martian, what would happen if? What would happen if you were trapped on the moon, on Mars, and how could you survive? Mathematically, if you enjoy equations and you enjoy figuring out how you can make Martian soil into Martian dust, it's not soil, into firm ground to plant potatoes. That's something you're into. The equations of how to plant potatoes. Read The Martian. In the same way, if you'd like to figure out what would happen if a group of people bought the North Pole and then tried to change the tilt of the Earth in order to make the North Pole habitable, read this, at least according to 1890s science. Basic plot. A group, the Gunners Club, who, this is the second book in the series. In the first book, they made a cannon which shot out a spacecraft out of a cannon that orbited the moon, came back, landed in the Pacific Ocean. Hence their name, the Gunners Club. In this book, they buy in the North Pole at auction. They create an auction between all the different countries that technically could have a claim. They then outbid, buy the North Pole, and then go down to Africa to build a cannon which could then shoot off something at such a great speed that it changes the tilt of the Earth in order to make the North Pole habitable. If that's something you're into, read this book. If you're someone who cares about story, I would not. However, reading a book from this age, especially conceptual science fiction from this age, you learn a lot about the 1890s, 1880s, I guess, because it came out in 89. For example, flight was not invented, as I'm sure you all know. That's about 15 years prior to flight, 1903, 1906, something like that. A few decades before any flying machines. So, how do they do anything with a cannon? Because that was the technology at the time. Also, at this time, there was explorations of the North Pole, the South Pole, I believe is in similar time, trying to see how far they can get. Nobody apparently ever got above the 84th degree, 84 degrees latitude, longitude. No one got that close to the North Pole. He goes and he lists off for paragraphs at a time. This person got to this degree in this minute, and this person got to this degree, and this person did this. All about the scientific acumen of the time. If that interests you, read it. Something he gets right, or interesting, is what happens to groups. This happens mainly in two different ways, or I guess three different ways. One of which is, so they create an auction where everyone who theoretically could have claims to the North Pole is invited. The Russian Empire is invited. The British Empire is invited. Remember, at this time, the British Empire was still a thing, so Canada was controlled by the British. Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, all of those are invited to say, hey, come here, we're gonna compete against you, we're gonna outbid you. And America is not there. Instead, this group called the Gunners Club is invited. They're the ones who create the auction. The winners, the Gunners Club, obviously. So all of these other countries that come together to bid for the North Pole, they all attempt to collude, to make a conspiracy, to have a cabal, to outbid these Americans. And they can't. Because basically they all want this thing for themselves. But they are better off if they have it as a group than if the Americans get it. But they're better off having it themselves than them having it as a group. Therefore, the one information that you have at an auction is what is the most that I'm willing to bid. And in order to have a cabal where they all join forces, take all the money they have and put it together, the information you have to give up is how much are you willing to bid, which they are unwilling to do. Why are they unwilling to do it? Because then they give up all the power they have as individuals. The individual countries lose power if they come together as a cabal, which is interesting. The other group mechanics that come into this are, so after the Gunners Club wins the North at auction, they then sell shares in order to raise funds, and they get $15 million in 1890s money. And so they tell a little bit to all their stockholders, hey, this is what we're planning on doing. At first, everyone's like, yay, look at this. We're going to go and we're going to take the North Pole and we're going to make it useful. And then they start to realize what would happen if, because their whole plan is we're going to change the tilt of the Earth, what would happen if we change the tilt of the Earth? What are all these negative consequences? First, it's positive, yay. Then it's negative. Then for being negative, at the end of the book, the public is planning on finding everyone they can who has a piece of this, kidnapping them and killing them or lynching them, which also feels like what would happen if this were to be the truth. Third thing, the third group mechanic that they get correct is hubris. Because at the end, they go and they fire the cannon off and nothing happens. And this is because of a mistake that happens early on, where the group has one guy to make the calculations, except this one guy makes a mistake. Instead of being 20 million miles, or kilometers, it's 20,000. He's off by a factor of 3 when it comes to how big the Earth is. Which then means, because it's not just radius of the Earth, it's then volume of the Earth, how much mass the Earth has. His calculations are so far off that they say you would need to fire off that cannon 1 trillion times in order to make the difference. But no one checked his math. No one tried to figure out, is he right? No, they just said, hey, this guy did the math, therefore the math is this, therefore we're going to go on, without checking to see if it was true or whether or not it made sense. Which obviously it didn't, because they were off by a factor of 1 trillion. So, Jules Verne. The Purchase of the North Pole. I'd probably skip, but it is an interesting read if you do read it. It is a quick read. It's 150 pages or thereabouts. There's a reason it's unknown. A lot of unknown stuff from the past. People are like, oh, is it great? Maybe. Usually not. You always come across some good stuff. But most things that aren't classics for a reason. So, I will see you for the next week of Rocket Summer, Rocket into Summer, the Rocket of the Summer Rockets, where we read old science fiction.